Hi, everyone.
Hi again. We are in Genesis 12. We're going to read verses 9 to 13 in the NIV.
Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while, because the famine was severe. And as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife,' and then they will kill me, but will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you." A cad is born.
A cad? That's a word that's out of fashion nowadays.
Yeah, well. But what it does tell me is there's good and bad in all the saints of the Bible. Abram has just heard in the previous section the 7 promises made to him from God. But I think this highlights the need for it to be based on God, not you. Based on unconditional. They had to be unconditional promises. Because you're going to fail sometimes. You're not going to always have the same strength of faith and faithfulness. This is something, I think, this is where I learned about grace, is these kind of examples. And I think that gives great comfort. Because you don't, as a witness, you think you have to be faithful, but you're never really told how faithful. And if you fall, it's like game over. Whereas here, no. He has his moments of faith and moments of failure. He's being tested all the time. He passes the test sometimes and he fails other times. But it's dependent on God's will, not his.
I will make of you a great nation. I will bless those who bless you. Yes, all 7 promises are unilateral. And you see the need for it by it being dramatic. That is right after the promises are made.
Yeah.
And right after he's built an altar and called upon the name of the Lord. Notice you see no reference here to him praying and calling on the name of the Lord. We made the point that calling on the name of the Lord at least implies prayer, and here also worship. But there's no indication that when he goes to Egypt that he's calling on God for solution. He's taking the initiative himself, and that's fatal to not to the relationship with God though.
No.
It's fatal in the sense that it brings us to earthly grief, and things will happen here that later on will pay off in adversity. But for the very first test of adversity, the famine, he fails. Yeah.
He doesn't have faith that God is going to protect him or provide for him during the famine. He sets out to do it himself.
Fix it himself, yeah.
And God doesn't do that again in other areas.
Oh yeah, later. Not consistently, however, as you pointed out. So God doesn't promise us continual prosperity. And I guess maybe you could cut him some slack and say maybe that's the understanding he had after these 7 promises, that his life was just going to be better and better. And unfortunately, that's a deception that's very much with us today.
But he's thinking he'll be killed. Well, how is that possible, given those promises?
Yeah.
So there's fear. Fear is, I think, is a common problem for all of us. And I've had times where people say, "Wow, that how did you do that? That was you stood up." I don't think when you're going through things, you're not thinking that way. I'm standing up, and then the very next day you can fail and be frightened by one little person who says something to you, and you're, "Ooh, I won't stand up."
Well, it underlines the fact that fear is fed by circumstances. Yeah. And if we dwell on the circumstances, we'll end up fearful. But also faith is fed by, it's fed. You need to feed it. Give us more faith, right?
Right.
Barnhouse has a good comment here, as does F.B. Meyer.
Okay. Barnhouse says, "One failure leads to another. If we depart from the will of God, at even a small angle, the distance between our road and God and the Lord's will, and the Lord." Okay, I'm going to read that. If we depart from the will of God at even a small angle, the distance between our road and the Lord's will increase. Abram, who had walked by faith all the way from Ur to Canaan, began to walk by the circumstances of famine. Then, without asking counsel of the Lord, he took a second step to avoid further trial. Having forgotten the counsel and care of the Lord, he forgot the promise of God concerning the seed which was to come. Circumstances, yeah.
It seems It seems to us absolutely we just can't believe that he could forget so soon. But we don't know how many weeks, months, maybe a year or two has already gone by, and now circumstances have changed.
Yeah.
So we can all forget the promises.
Yeah, and I think circumstances do affect you more than you realize. If you can be confident when everything's going great, but as soon as you have a stretch of bad things happening, it affects you.
And like Israel in the wilderness, we don't know if he's now come to expect appearances of the Lord with new injections of faith. Maybe that's ceased. As well, even in the wilderness, Israel had those, but spread over 40 years.
Yeah,
You can
didn't seem to work with them too well.
You can quickly forget.
Yeah.
F.B. Meyer says in his book Abraham, had God pledged himself to give his servants an unbroken run of prosperity? How many more counterfeit Christians would there be? Well, it is that he has made no such promise, though it is certainly true that godliness has the promise of the life that now is and of that which is to come. Do not be surprised if a famine meets you. It is no proof of your Father's anger, but is permitted to come to test you or to root you deeper, as the whirlwind makes the tree grapple its roots deeper into the soil. What a great point. So does God wish us deep pockets or deep roots? So prosperity, of course, is a false security, right?
Yeah.
So if we want real security, God's going to have to give us adversity.
We learn from everything, good and bad.
We'll put in a link to an early video we did, Isaiah, Fear versus Faith, and how even in his day, 2,700 years ago, politicians were fearmongers. See you next time.